Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm rising on behalf of the Greens to support the Labour Party's call for a review of Part 4 in this bill. We're supporting the bill, but we're really disturbed at this attack on affordable housing. It's absolutely essential that we do something about the housing crisis in this country at every opportunity, and this is why this is a retrogressive part of what would otherwise be a reasonable bill. And I would agree with the previous speakers who say that infrastructure, which is a wonderful word, must be about something as basic as a roof over your head. We are very deeply concerned about the repeal of an optional mechanism to local authorities, which could have been a real incentive for change, because some local authorities have taken housing seriously, and in the past some of them really haven't. And we need to encourage and facilitate through legislation that kind of change. I lived on the East Coast, Tairawhiti, for the last 8 years before I moved to Hauraki, and a former member of this House, Sue Bradford, who everyone knows was very concerned about poverty, and I visited a number of housing activists in communities such as Tokomaru Bay and other places on the East Coast. And these organisations and individuals who were trying to help their people into housing were blocked by poverty and lack of opportunity for housing because the mechanisms were so difficult for people to get through. And when we have a mechanism that actually would have improved that situation, the last thing we should be doing is blocking it in this House. And the local government in that region was not well known for its commitment to poverty or its recognition of housing as part of their responsibility. And they needed encouragement and leadership from this House to make sure that they stopped being a barrier and started being a facilitator. And that's what the kind of housing instruments that have been discussed in the House today could have been for places like Tairawhiti. And Sue and I went into homes that were unfixable, where families of a single mother with 7 children with no running water, she couldn't get rural housing to fix her house because it was so far gone that it was unfixable, but she had no opportunity to get the money to get a new house. And so for all the rhetoric about fixing up rural homes, etc., or getting into new housing, it just wasn't working for these people. There was no way. And when we start building a process for changing that, for programs like shared equity, it's really disturbing to see that this is going to be ignored. And we were very keen to see change, and we'll be voting against this, because if you can't get into housing, you can't get to first base. And I think that in other countries it's really easy to talk about long-term leases and rentals because they have the infrastructure for long-term leases and rentals. It's okay if you don't own a house. But in Aotearoa, New Zealand, you're really unfortunate if you can't get past that. And if you have family members, as I do, living in places like Auckland who are young and poor, there is absolutely no way that they even can consider getting past first base. And we need to be listening to the community housing activists, not just the developers. The community housing activists in this country, the third sector on housing, have got strategies, they have got ideas, and they have got mechanisms that we need to be listening to so we can break some of the bottlenecks around Māori housing, around housing for young families, around housing for beneficiaries. And at the moment, these people are in crisis, and we don't need to block them in this way. So it's very disappointing and cynicism developing when you see a bill that's about infrastructure that's actually about blocking, in part, some of the most positive mechanisms to help break the bottleneck. And I guess for me, I lived in a very old house when I was young that needed a lot doing to it, but I was able to get a family benefit change which allowed me to get into housing. And from then on, I was able to build my life and my family's life from that base. But I know there's lots and lots of people nowadays, because times are a lot harder and properties are a lot more expensive, who will never get that opportunity. Plus those people have got student loans, plus they've got debt before they even reach the age of 25 that I couldn't even dream of when I was a young, broke person. And so we have to think about the conditions that the next generation face in terms of housing. And it's not good enough to just wring our hands, but allow legislation to go through with mechanisms in it being undermined because it's convenient for whatever reason. And I know there is good local authority effort on housing in this country, but I also know there is a lot of complacency. And if you go to other countries I mean, places like London, housing is a vital thing.
Marion Street, the Honourable.